Oh, hello, it's the PP Podcast. Hey, it's episode 8 of the PP Podcast. Come on in. Now, what you're about to hear is a conversation between myself and Sonia Cropper. Sonia is the Community Engagement Coordinator for Sutton Community Farm, and they're a cooperative organisation which grows fruit and veg according to organic principles. And not only that, but they harvest and distribute these fruits and veggies across the Borough of Sutton and slightly beyond. Now, Sonia is going to go into more details about this and also about their volunteering programme, which sees people from many walks of life getting involved in the agricultural process. It's absolutely fascinating. I hope you have as much fun listening as I had creating this. It's the PP Podcast with Sutton Community Farm. Hey Sonia, welcome to the PP Podcast. So great that you can join me for a chat. How are you doing?
Yeah, very well, thank you.
Oh, nice one. So when I was prepping for the podcast and I was researching potential guests, I think at least 2 people in my network had suggested Sutton Community Farm for me to contact. So I thought that's probably worth chasing up that lead. And so here we are. But to be perfectly honest with you, I'd not actually heard of you guys before this time. So can you take me back to the very beginning and tell the story of how Sutton Community Farm actually began?
Yeah, so we actually get told that all the time, to be honest, in terms of people that have lived in Sutton for a number of years and somehow or another chance across us and they're just astounded that we exist. They're like, oh, I had no idea you guys were here. And I guess we are somewhat hidden behind a hedge. So perhaps if you wouldn't have reason to come here or find out about us, it can be a surprise. But the farm was set up 10 years ago. So in February just gone, we had our 10-year anniversary party, which was a very joyous occasion.
Oh, that was pretty good timing, right before lockdown.
Exactly. It feels like a very long time ago now. People are allowed to mingle and interact. But the farm was originally set up by an environmental charity based down in Hackbridge called Bioregional, who were they did some research essentially into what the Borough of Sutton might benefit from, and they decided to set up a community farm just so that it could provide more opportunity for the residents of Sutton to access nature, get to know other people through volunteering, grow a bit of food, have sort of better access to fresh food, and also sort of tackle issues of social isolation. And they thought, how can we address all these various sort of social needs for the borough, and came up with the idea of a community farm. So they got access to the land, and originally when they first gained access, it was really just sort of open fields. There wasn't any infrastructure on the site, lots of weeds, and really not much else. And when it was first started, it was really just a chance for people to come together and have a nice time. And there wasn't really such a strong focus on production and really sort of contributing to the food system and trying to change the local food system. And over the past 10 years, it's really grown a lot as an organisation and a community project, and is pretty much unrecognisable, I'd say, in terms of the amount of infrastructure that's gone up, that's sort of facilitated a huge volume of veg being grown on the farm. And last year we grew 17 tons of vegetables. Wow. Which which is epic. I mean, it's a 7-acre site, about half of which is under cultivation, and there's really now quite a strong emphasis on food production and seriously kind of contributing to the local food supply. And alongside that, we run a veg box scheme, which is not for profit, and we deliver to people's houses and pickup points all over South London and Surrey. And now we are delivering to sort of more than 600 households a week. So quite small scale in terms of the number of people that live in London or around London, but yeah, certainly much bigger than it ever has been. And the farm sort of continues to go from strength to strength, really.
Yeah, cool. That's so great to hear. And it's a lovely location you've got there as well, because I happened to actually take a walk up to the Telegraph track a few weeks ago. I wanted to see where you guys are actually situated. And did you know the history of those farms? Have you heard about Homes for Heroes?
Yeah, precisely. So it was originally for veterans coming back after World War One. All of the surrounding land, really, where we are on the Little Woodcote estate, was used for agricultural purposes and food growing purposes, or like grazing for animals. So yeah, certainly in terms of the past century or so, there's a real rich heritage of food production. And then also we've got the lavender fields, who are just down the road. And in terms of what the land was sort of used before, it was used for food growing. Lots of lavender and mint was grown on this land.
All right, so presumably you've got great soil for growing crops then.
We've actually got terrible soil, which you wouldn't think, given as we do successfully manage to grow quite a large volume of vegetables. But yeah, it's very sandy soil. We're sort of on a chalk bedrock, so quite different to a lot of the soil that you'd find sort of in inner London, really, which tends to be much heavier on the clay factor. And so sandy soil, which means watering is a huge issue, because soils just don't hold moisture and nutrients as well. So it's kind of been a labor of love in terms of adding lots of organic matter to our soils over the years, and really kind of taking our role as being stewards of the land quite seriously, just in order to successfully grow vegetables. And also it's a learning curve in terms of trying things out and realizing that things don't work so well, and so abandoning them.
All right, so go on, give me an example. What hasn't worked so well?
Root vegetables don't seem to work very well here. The first summer I was working here, there were lots of potatoes out in the fields, but they were tiny little potatoes, and that was the summer where it rained an awful lot, and we had a successive series of very wet volunteer Wednesdays efforts, sort of rootling around trying to find potatoes, and they were coming out the size of like little marbles, and it was like, oh, is that a rock? Is that a potato? Not quite sure. So we've abandoned potatoes and generally rooty things.
Okay, go on. So let's talk about what has worked well then.
Yeah, I mean, there is loads of things that work really well. I mean, sort of our biggest crops, we've got a lot of polytunnels, and so we use them to great effect all year round, really. They're a great asset to have in terms of, just the opportunities they create in terms of what you can and can't grow. So in the summer, there are 4 main crops that we grow in the tunnels are tomatoes, cucumbers, aubergines and peppers. And certainly the tomatoes absolutely thrive in the tunnels, and then particularly there's lots of warm sunshine, which we've had for the past few years. And then out in the fields we grow a lot of salads, a lot of chard, a lot of kale, a lot of beetroot, some sweet corn, loads of courgettes, lots of squashes that are ready in the autumn, which is super delicious. Lots of French climbing beans. It's a whole medley. And what's really nice is that we have a crop rotation plan that means that sort of the bulk of what we produce is we're harvesting that in the sort of summer into autumn months, but we do have things that we grow all year round. So it means there's sort of constant harvest. Almost 51 weeks of the year we're harvesting, which is really nice. So even if things aren't the most economical things to grow in terms of they're going to bring in lots of money, it's good just to have a variety. And because we've got such a huge volume of people coming on site in terms of loads of volunteers and loads of school groups and loads of visitors, it's really nice to be able to be harvesting kind of all year round, just to make that link with seasonality.
Yeah, nice. And so where do the volunteers sort of fit into all of this?
So, we are a community farm. In terms of our business model, we're a community benefit society, which is a form of co-op. So we are owned by our community shareholder members. And with regards to the people that are doing the work, we've got a small staff team, most of whom are part-time, and then we have a really huge volunteer family, some of whom have been coming for years and years, some of whom just come for maybe a few months and then their situation changes, some of whom just come once or twice, but generally there seems to always be quite a strong cohort of volunteers who are involved in all different stages of crop production on the farm, so all the different stages that are involved in growing the vegetables. And then we also have volunteers involved in the veg box side of things, which is really how the farm makes the bulk of its income. And in terms of the volume of work, it just wouldn't be possible to achieve as much as we do if we didn't have volunteer input. So in terms of my role as the community engagement coordinator, I sort of oversee and coordinate all the volunteers coming. And it's amazing to have such a collective community effort working towards trying to change the food system, and in so doing, like, bettering people's lives, really. In terms of people coming to the farm, it's really just very tangible, the impact that it can have on people in terms of improving their mental well-being and physical well-being, giving them the opportunity to learn new skills and gain new knowledge and make new friends and feel more connected to their local area, to feel more connected to the seasons and where food comes from and the importance of it, and just how much work goes into growing, producing and distributing food. So yeah, it's an amazing collective effort, really, which is where our resilience lies as an organisation, really.
Yeah, nice. So in terms of the seasonality of crop harvesting then, let's say we're currently in early summer, so what's hot on the menu?
At the moment, not much, because we are just coming to the end of what's known as the Hungry Gap, which is definitely the most challenging time of year for food growers, universally, I'd say, at least in the Northern Hemisphere. And all of the new season crops are in the ground and they've been planted out, but they've not yet reached maturity where they can start being harvested. So there's, sort of this 2 to 3 month period of the year where it's springtime, and so you can see lots of life coming back to all the trees and all the plants and all the flowers, and everything keeps popping up, and the days get longer and warmer and brighter. So intuitively you would think, okay, there's going to be lots of food around now, but actually this is really when the cupboard is at its most bare and it's most challenging, really, certainly in terms of trying to fill our veg boxes. Can be quite hard, and in terms of what we have growing on the farm, so some leafy greens, so a bit of chard, some salad, we've got some fresh garlic, which is quite exciting. So we're going to do our main garlic harvest in a couple of weeks' time. It's not quite ready, but we can still pull it out of the ground and kind of use it in cooking, just slightly different to how you'd use dried garlic. Very excitingly, this year, for the first time ever, we have a batch of courgettes that we've grown inside a polytunnel. So usually we grow all of our courgettes out in the fields, and they do extremely well. And they are very heavy to mission in crates out from the fields back into our packing area. But this year we've got courgettes inside one of our biggest polytunnels, and that means that our courgette harvests started a whole month early, essentially. So last week was our first harvest. So this is we're just starting to see glimmers of hope, the new growing season starting to arrive in terms of harvesting capabilities. But aside from that, quite small leafy greens, a bit of rhubarb, some shallots, some globe artichokes, which are perennial, some herbs. But our proper period of harvesting is yet to begin.
But 17 tons of veg, that's a lot. Mm-hmm. Are you guys adhering to the correct procedures of manual handling?
I know. I mean, farming is literally backbreaking labour. Yeah, I mean, funny you should mention manual handling, actually. We've just done lots of training for all of our volunteers on manual handling, because you can imagine it's a very pertinent issue working on a vegetable farm whereby you're constantly lifting up heavy crates of veg, putting it back down again, moving it from one end to the other, shifting wheelbarrows and trolleys. And yeah, it's really important to take care of your back, especially in terms of getting to the end of the growing season, you know.
Yeah, and so in what part of the process then do volunteers get involved?
Yeah, so the volunteers are involved with all stages of crop production. So how that looks is they'll be involved in seed sowing right at the beginning stages, planting out, so when our seedlings get a little bit bigger and they're ready to go out in the fields or in the tunnels, crop maintenance, so that would be things like the tomatoes, side shooting them, weeding, generally making sure that everything's growing nice and strong. Then when the time comes, they're involved in harvesting, so that really kind of dominates a lot of the summer months, just having all hands on deck to help with the harvesting, because by that point, yeah, the plants will be established, and so there's less need maybe for maintenance. And then at the end of the life cycle for the particular crop in question, they'll be involved in sort of clearing the beds, the vegetable beds, adding them to the compost heap, getting involved in the composting process, and the cycle then starts all over again. So it's really amazing, actually. I mean, in terms of what we grow on the farm, we grow everything in the house, and we start all from seed, and we grow everything according to organic principles, which is like very, very fundamental in terms of our ethos as a community project. And because we do everything in-house, it means that, yeah, volunteers or school kids or visitors, people just coming to the farm to get involved, can be involved in all different stages of the plant life cycle and the crop production process, which is just an amazing learning opportunity. And it's very engaging because, yeah, you start out with a little seed in your hand, and then some months later you're eating the vegetable that came from that seed, and then some months later you're pulling it out and putting it in the compost, and then putting the compost out in the fields, then plant more plants later. I mean, it sort of just goes on, really.
Wow, the full cycle. That's really cool. And so I know you said that obviously right now you're not harvesting a lot, but if I was to place an order today, what would I get in a box?
Okay, so you'd probably get some lovely lush. You get a nice medley, actually. You get some really nice greens. So maybe some chard or some spinach, some salad, some kale. So that will keep you nice and topped up. And then you'd probably get a punnet of tomatoes, maybe some fresh carrots, broccoli. The thing about the summer veg boxes is that it's really, I mean, you hear this phrase of eat the rainbow as being something that's generally good for you. And I feel like in the summertime, that's really when you have the opportunity to do such a thing, really, because there'll be like lots of greens and reds and purples and yellows. Just makes it really exciting. I mean, if you like vegetables, then summertime is when things really come into their own, and it's just sort of a hive of productivity everywhere. And I love vegetables, so I'm pretty excited that the Hungry Gap is like almost coming to an end, and we seem to have lots of really tasty vegetables filling our plates.
It sounds delicious. So is it like a one-size-fits-all box, or do you cater according to individual needs?
Yeah, good question. So we cater to all tastes, really. We sell 9 different types of veg box. So some of them only have vegetables in, some of them only have fruit in, some of them have got both fruit and veg in them, and they come in a range of sizes as well. So it really just depends on how often you are cooking and how many people are in your household that you'll be cooking for. So kind of our smallest option would be good for 1 to 2 people cooking maybe half the week. And then our largest option would be really for a family who'd be cooking quite a lot.
Okay, and so do people get to choose exactly what they want, or is that choice sort of made for them? How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, the website definitely gives you an indication of the different options of veg box that we sell. And the good thing about our veg box scheme is that there's quite a lot of flexibility built into it. So you only ever sort of pay for what you receive. You don't have to commit to any length of time or any number of boxes. And it's really easy to change your order. So if you order something and you're like, oh, this is a bit too much for me, I'm not quite getting through it. Or you're like, oh, it's not quite enough, I want more of this tasty, delicious veg, then you can, just log on to your customer account and sort of self-manage what it is that you are due to receive. And then equally, you can have a veg box once a week, once a fortnight, every third week, or every 4 weeks. So yeah, we've tried to sort of cater to all different tastes. At the moment, obviously, it's quite different with regards to COVID-19. We've seen a huge surge in demand for our veg boxes. And I think, there's a number of reasons for that, obviously, in terms of what happened with the supermarkets, people being more cautious to go to supermarkets, not wanting to stand in long queues, having issues with their home deliveries from like the bigger supermarket retailers, has meant that lots of people have turned to sort of smaller veg suppliers or veg box schemes, which is really, really encouraging in terms of people thinking a bit more about where their food comes from and where they want to support. And then I think also the combination of obviously lots of restaurants being closed and people not going out and people spending the vast majority of their time now at home cooking more, it makes a lot of sense. I think that people are buying more food via these kind of routes.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's a very interesting time that we're living in, given that you have to queue to get into the supermarket these days. But talking about supermarkets, and I expect the answer to this question is probably fairly obvious. But in your own words, what would you say are the main differences between what you produce and what I could find in the supermarket? So how does that compare?
It depends what you are comparing. So what we are putting into our veg boxes is veg that has been grown in accordance with organic principles, and it will have been harvested very, very close to when it is delivered, in terms of the veg that we have grown and that we are selling via our veg boxes. So there is a level of freshness there, and obviously taste is going to be amplified because we only harvest when things are ready to be harvested. We don't have to harvest them really far in advance because we're not transporting them a really long distance. And so the flavour and the quality is generally extremely high for what we're growing ourselves. In terms of the comparison with supermarket veg, so often what you get is big food producers or big farmers that are producing for supermarkets at scale will often prioritize growing varieties of vegetables that have a number of attributes, most of which don't really relate to taste or quality necessarily in terms of like your experience of eating that vegetable. Instead, so if you think about tomatoes is a good example, they'll grow varieties that will be very red and very like big and quite juicy, and will store well and transport well, so that they look absolutely tantalizing. When you see them on the supermarket shelf, you're like, yes, I'm going to get these tomatoes and they're going to make me really happy because it's summer and so great. Or maybe, not summer, because you can buy tomatoes all year round from the supermarkets. But in terms of how they taste, they might be really watery. The texture might not be that great. And so the actual experience of eating it might be a bit of a disappointment, to be honest. But it looks amazing. And then equally, in terms of thinking about when things are harvested, if things are being transported really far distances, or need to last quite a long time before they're actually going to get to the shelf of the supermarket or to consumers, this will also be taken into consideration in terms of growing varieties and then implementing practices that mean that the veg can be picked often when it's underripe, so it can ripen on the way, or is designed to ripen when it's already in your home, and can travel really, really far distances, because often you'll get sort of very, very long supply chains where there'll be lots of different companies involved, and it will just kind of go from place to place to place. and will have had a whole exciting history before it ends up in your kitchen. And what that means is that sort of the quality of the veg can actually be not as high, because it's just had a lot of other things that are of great importance in terms of making sure that you choose to buy that veg in the first place when you're thinking about what you're going to have for dinner. And then in terms of what the experience of like having it for dinner might be a little bit underwhelming, or maybe not underwhelming, but just not as good. Whereas the veg that we're selling, you know, it's all seasonal, and it's as local as we can make it. So yeah, we don't supply, in terms of what we grow on the farm, it's not enough to supply our veg boxes for 12 months of the year. So there's about 3 months of the year where the vast majority, almost everything going to the veg boxes, is grown on the farm. But yeah, we try our best. Certainly something like when we gather feedback from our customers and sort of informal feedback from like volunteers and other people, or people that I end up feeding just through bringing veg home and cooking for people myself, is it tastes amazing, and that's often what convinces people to stick with it, essentially. I mean, it's sort of incomparable sometimes, the difference in taste between having something freshly picked when it's in season compared to something where that's just not the case at all.
Yeah. So sorry, Sonia, just going back to the volunteering aspect of it, how can people get involved, and what are you looking for in that sense?
So everything is very unusual at the moment because of the pandemic. Ordinarily, we have pretty much an open door policy in terms of mostly anyone can come and volunteer. Obviously, they have support needs. I mean, we do offer supported volunteering as well for volunteers who have autism and learning disabilities or other support needs, but generally, we love the fact that we have like a very a rich medley of different people coming to get involved in this amazing community project. When lockdown came into force, that really threw everything up in the air for us. Obviously, it was quite a stressful time for everybody en masse, but particularly in terms of how we operate. We have a large volume of people coming to site every week. We need those people to carry on coming to site. The government deemed us an essential business, and therefore everyone working here as key workers, which was really reassuring that we were going to be able to continue doing what we're doing just because we are producers and distributors of food. But then it was also of just the utmost importance to us that everybody stayed safe. No one was risking themselves by coming to the farm. And so we've had to bring in a lot of changes in response to COVID-19. And some of those changes have impacted on how we manage volunteers. So now it's the case whereby we've introduced an online rota management system, so we know exactly who is coming when. So it's no longer the case that people can just show up, which it was before, where it was like quite fluid really and relaxed, which was really nice, but also had its challenges. Whereas now we know exactly who's coming when. We've had to quite significantly cap the number of people coming to each session, and we've also spread out the sessions across the course of the week, so that we can have smaller number of people on site at any one time, just so that we can ensure that we are sticking to the social distancing guidelines and that we don't get too close to each other, basically, which is definitely challenging at times, just because we are confined by the space. But generally, I mean, the system is actually working extremely well, and we are just enjoying the benefits of having had the same sort of team of volunteers. So essentially, we had to make the decision to stop accepting new volunteers, which we've never had to do before, but we were so overwhelmed by the number of people wanting to get in touch and offer their help to volunteer that sort of for the first month or so, I was super keen to try and say yes to everybody, because I recognize it's really, really important for people to have the opportunity to come, to get outside their houses, to get involved, to contribute to a community project that they deem being worthwhile, just to lend a hand. And then also in terms of taking care of people's mental health during this whole pandemic situation, I was really, really trying to say yes to everybody, but then it reached capacity and it just wasn't possible to continually say yes, and to keep adding more and more people into the system. Because, we're just a small little community veg farm and there's only so many people that we can have on site. So for the time being, we're not accepting any new volunteers, and that is unlikely to change until people significantly start going back to work en masse, I would say. Lots of our core volunteers who've been volunteering with us for a long while are not volunteering with us at the moment. They're staying away, either because they fall into the vulnerable category, or they are living with vulnerable people, or they're looking after kids, or just their life situation has changed so that they can't come and volunteer for the time being, and that might not change for quite a long time. I mean, nobody knows what's going to happen, do they? Or how the situation is going to develop. But in their place, we've had a sort of new influx of very committed local volunteers, who now are well and truly part of the family here. And because they tend to come for the same type of volunteer sessions each week at the same time, it's meant that they've developed relationships with each other and friendships with each other. And there's also a familiarity with the work, which means they've got the confidence to take initiative and take responsibility and take ownership over what needs to happen, which has actually made our job way easier. And we are actually achieving far more work than we've ever achieved in terms of being in a very, very strong position for the start of the growing season and delivering more veg boxes to more households than we've ever done before by quite a long way. And that was all incredibly stressful right at the beginning of lockdown and the pandemic. And now it's very calm, it's very serene, there's laughter, there's enjoyment, and there's a real sort of diligence to the workload as well, which means we're actually thriving at the moment, I feel, which was really an unexpected turn of events.
Wow. So what does the future look like then? Have you guys got plans for growth? Sorry, excuse the pun.
Yeah.
But yeah, what does business look like going forward then for Sutton Community Farm?
Good question. I mean, it's something that we regularly visit, because I feel there are so many different elements to what we do as a community organisation, and it's been sort of an evolution over the past 10 years. So we're still a relatively young organisation and young community project, but there's been many different phases and different things that have come and gone, some things that have stuck, some things that have sort of faded into the background. And it's a bit of a hodgepodge medley, to be honest, in terms of the range of different things that we do here. Looking to the future, what we're really hoping to achieve is just like very stable economic resilience as a community organisation, I think, because we're trying to move away from having any dependency on grant funding. And generally, we're not that reliant on grant funding, but it definitely helps us balance the books, really. And we're somewhat limited in terms of our hopes and dreams for like taking over London, for example, in terms of getting everybody to buy their veg from Sutton Community Farm. We don't really have any plans for that, because essentially you don't want to get too big, because then you lose the spirit of what you're doing and you lose that personal connection, potentially become less accountable. So I think we're hoping for like sort of small, steady growth over the next couple of years, but then sort of reaching an equilibrium point whereby we're covering our bases and we're covering our costs and it feels manageable. Like we're sort of restrained by the physicality of the farm itself, as in like we've got this piece of land. We don't have any huge aspirations to grow any bigger physically. Might develop a bit of the land next door that belongs to our neighbour, but that remains to be seen how that will play out. But in terms of what we're doing, it's like we're here on this piece of land, we're growing this amount of food, we're delivering to a number of people and a number of households in a way that feels manageable. And it would just be super great to get to a place whereby that was like a self-sustaining setup, and we didn't have to worry too much about losing money. Because if we can get to a place whereby we're self-sufficient from the financial side of things, then it means we can continue to focus our efforts on growing and distributing organic veg, whilst also providing a lot of opportunities for people to come and get involved and to benefit from us as an organisation and a community project. And sort of the more people that get involved, the better, to some extent. And sort of the more supported volunteering opportunities we can provide, educational opportunities, just ways of engaging people that live in the surrounding area. Yeah, it would just be great to have those two things running alongside each other in a way that felt manageable and productive and energizing.
Nice. Sonia, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time out to chat. This has been really great. And I hope anyone listening as well will be feel inspired to check out Sutton Community Farm, see what's going on there.
Oh, thanks so much. Yeah, I would just say come and give us a visit sometime. When you're allowed to, that is. But yeah, it's a really amazing project here. It's full of good energy, and it's very inspiring just to see what's possible to achieve thanks to the effort of a lot of people, really, and a lot of tasty vegetables as a result.
Yeah, nice. Really appreciate it, Sonia. Thank you so much. Good luck to you and your team for the months ahead.
Oh, thanks so much. Take care.